pimento cheese sandwiches, egg salad,
Let's go. Oh, boy, out on the veranda, huh?
which is what they serve me at Augusta.
I didn't know that. Pimento cheese and egg salad
And it
sandwich.
still costs $1.50.
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah.
it's all about the patrons' enjoyment. Not trying to make money. They make enough money.
Yeah, they're probably not hurting.
I think the television contract is
Yeah. All right. Well, it's about that time. Looks like we've got Penny and or George with us, so it's great to have you all with us this morning. I think that Danny Hodge is hoping to join us later on. Danny is the chair of the foundation. She had to be away this Sunday, but she's hoping to join us by Zoom. So let's get started. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Holy God, we give you thanks and praise for this day. We thank you for the gifts of family and friends and the many blessings of these lives you've given us. We thank you so much for this church, for the way in which you have made your love known to us and to so many in the community around us. And I give you special thanks and praise for this foundation, which you have so richly blessed us in ways in which it enhances our ministries and allows us to better serve the world. In your son, Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Hopefully we'll have some more people joining us over time, either in person or Zoom. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to give a quick a little bit of history and background on the foundation. One of the reasons that we want to do this is really, whenever I talk to people, I'm always reminded that even people who've been members of this church for 15 or 20 years are not always clear what the foundation is, whether it is kind of distinct from the church and, you know, how it's run and operated. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. The impetus for starting the Trinity Foundation, the formal name is the Marble Falls Trinity Episcopal Church Foundation. And again, the impetus was a large bequest that this church received from the Dick and Marion Riepert estate. Back, I guess Marion died around 2011. You know, just a quick aside about Marion, she was a real sweet woman. By the time I was attending here, she mostly had to be in a wheelchair, I think, and she had quite a bit of cognitive loss. And, you know, it was just kind of a very elderly looking, kind of decrepit woman. And, you know, her husband, Dick, had always, who was dead by then, had always said that, you know, well, we pledge and we pay by check. But when the offering plate comes around, you always put something in. Doesn't matter what. So every Sunday when Marion was there, she put in 2 cents. And, you know, very biblical, obviously. And I remember Amy one time, my wife, you know, he was talking about this sweet old destitute woman who only had 2 cents to put in every Sunday, and just how sweet she thought that was. When Marion passed away, we learned that she and Dick had left the bulk of their estate to Trinity, and that amounted to about $1.4 million. So again, there's something very biblical about this whole story. Timing wise, things really fell into place in a lot of respects. We had just completed a debt reduction campaign and had retired about $600,000 in construction debt that we were carrying at the time. So we were debt free about the time that this request came in. We had also gone through a visioning process to kind of see what our priorities were as a church. What came out as our #1 priority by far was a parish hall. we didn't have a parish hall. We had a small narthex, and whenever we had any kind of fellowship activity, we'd have to set up a bunch of tables out in the narthex, bring in chairs, and we could probably, if we really squeezed everybody in, we could get about 40, 45 people maybe in the narthex. And any overflow had to go sit in the church or classroom down the hall. So it just wasn't ideal. We really wanted a place where we could build community and fellowship. So then all of a sudden we received this large bequest. We spent a lot of time discussing what we were going to do with it. And I really wanted to, most of y'all know me to be a very almost irritatingly cautious person. I like to think things over and consider all my options. And I really felt like that, A, we didn't want to fritter away this money. And B, everybody was going to have an idea about how this money should be spent. And we really, needed to be careful how we handled this. The senior warden at the time, I believe, was Mike Kimball. He and his wife moved to Georgetown some time back. So some of y'all, most of y'all probably never met the Kimballs. Mike said, we need to protect this money from ourselves. And I thought that was a really kind of a wise thing. So we created the foundation just to create a little bit of separation between the church and the foundation, but all the funds in that foundation to be utilized for the mission and ministry of this church. So that really always guides us in terms of how we take out money and how we spend it. And we have some different funds within the foundation, each of which has a set of guidelines restricting how that money can be spent. So when we initially created the foundation, we created a capital fund, a vestry discretionary fund, and an endowment. And we intended for those first two to be spent within 4 or 5 years. And that's what happened. That capital fund turned out to be well invested, and it made quite a bit of money over time. And by the time we actually got around to building this parish hall, the courtyard, and adding on to the church, building that narthex that comes out, we were able to do that without incurring any debt and without any capital. We did that all with money in the bank. So that's an incredible thing. And again, part of that was because we had done all the hard work of retiring the debt beforehand. Otherwise, we would have just been paying off debt with that. So that really worked out well. The vestry discretionary fund, we basically took a tithe of the money that we received from the reapers and decided that we were going to spend half of that on projects that the church had been talking about but hadn't been able to afford, and half of it we were just going to give away to area nonprofits as grants. And so we gave away that. So about, I think we figured about 150,000 was what we put into that fund. We used that to create the signage that we now have out on 1431. This granite sign that we now have out here, that used to be our sign out on 1431, but it was below grade. You couldn't see it. And it is dark. So again, we couldn't see it. And so we wanted something that would show up a little bit better. So we built that limestone wall with the sign out on 1431 and moved the granite one over here. That's what a lot of that went to. We did some clearing out on the land, just some projects that the church really needed done. And then the other $75,000, again, we just gave away over 3 years to some of the different nonprofits we were already seeing. So that started us down that path of making grants to some of the area nonprofits. And the way I've always seen it, giving away money to nonprofits is only one tool in my overall goal, which is always relationship. And So it wasn't just that we were giving money. It was that we were ensuring that we were involved in these different nonprofits, that people were volunteering, and that we were doing whatever we could to support them. And over time, I think that many of the nonprofits in the area have come to think of us as partners, and that's really what I wanted. So that's been really gratifying to see how that has all worked out. But again, we got rid of those two funds very quickly, and then we wound up creating a couple of new funds, which is kind of where we are today. We still have the endowment, of course. We have what's called a memorial fund, which is in effect a vestry discretionary fund. It's unrestricted money, and much of it has been given to the church in people's honor or memory. When, as an example, when Lucia Gurley passed away, her son made a very, very generous gift to the foundation that went into the memorial fund, and then was some of it has been distributed into other funds and projects. I'll pass around real quick while we're talking about some of the different funds. This is the most recent foundation report that will show you what the funds are and how the funds are allocated within the foundation. So we have an endowment fund. We have an organ fund. We have the memorial fund that I just talked about. We have a maintenance reserve fund, which is just used for kind of unbudgeted, mostly large maintenance items, replacements. We use the maintenance reserve fund to replace, I think, 7 AC units a couple of years ago, and those were 16 or 17 years old, I think, by the time we replaced them. They really needed to be replaced. As you might imagine, cost a pretty good chunk of change, and would have been a real burden on our operating budget if we hadn't had this maintenance reserve fund.
56,000.
What's that? $56,000 for that AC project alone. So, and that kind of thing comes up. There's been some talk with all the hail damage. I think our roof is fine. It's suffered a little bit of cosmetic damage. It's a metal roof that should last, 40, 50 years, I guess. But someday it's going to have to be replaced, and that's, probably we figured would cost six figures. So it's great to have this maintenance reserve fund. And then we have a contingency reserve fund. And that was kind of created as a, in case of emergency, break glass fund. We have some kind of a major expense come up, or, one of our, if we had like a large, somebody who's a large supporter of our budget move away, and so we lose a large pledge or something like that. So the hope is that we will never have to use that contingency reserve fund, but we think it's a very wise thing to have in place. You never know what's going to come up. So we've set up these funds so that they're restricted, but I also wanted to create some flexibility. And those restrictions can be amended by vestry resolution if they have to. The way I see it, I want to help determine how these funds are being spent, but I don't want to tie the church's needs, because I have to think about the needs of the church 50, 100 years from now, and I don't know what those needs are. I don't want to tie the hands of the people who are here 100 years from now, because I can't foresee what kind of challenges they're going to experience. So anyways, you can see that if you look at this report, that the bulk of the foundation is still in that endowment. And that was something that I really desperately wanted when I got here. I felt like that to ensure the long-term financial health of this church, we are going to have to develop kind of alternate streams of revenue besides just pledges. I think pledges are great, and they ensure the ongoing support of the parishioners. But I've also heard it said, that based on that pledge model, every church is basically 1 year from closing up. You have one bad year and you're out of money. So I really wanted to have that endowment available, provide that additional source of revenue, which it is certainly doing. Remember, Bill, do you remember the most recent distribution from the endowment?
28,000.
28,000. So that's 28,000 that's coming out into the operating budget that came out this year from the endowment. So that's a fairly conservative draw that is allowing the foundation to fund our ministries and also grow at least a little bit. So we hope to encourage more contributions into the endowment and other funds, but hopefully that fund will continue to grow slowly over time, even out without more contributions. The special funds, you can see we've got an organ fund and a children's fund. Children's fund, we're basically closing up. That's a fund that has existed for quite a while. It was created when this playscape was built out here. That was contributions were taken up for that in memory of a parishioner who was killed in action over in Afghanistan, Matthew Matula. And as it turned out, more money came in than was needed to build that playscape. So the rest of the bulk of the money we set aside, but we never really had any set purpose for it. We weren't sure what we were going to do with it. Eventually, we decided, well, it shouldn't just be sitting there. So we decided we're going to use it to help fund the position of nursery attendant. And so that money is being drawn out, and our intent is to close that account within a couple of years. But again, that money is being used to serve the church and to serve our mission and ministries. And then the maintenance reserve fund, as I've said, is really to help fund unbudgeted expenses related to our property. We are contributing. It's kind of a sinking fund in a way. We're contributing to it annually out of our budget, just as a kind of a financial discipline in a way. Let's keep putting aside money for those future events that we know are going to come along. And I've seen churches close up. There was one in particular out in Houston that closed because of deferred maintenance. And they just couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford it until finally the city said, you've got, you're out of code, and they needed millions of dollars to bring them up to code, and they had to close. And so it's really important to have this kind of fund, and for us to have the discipline, the financial discipline to contribute towards it. And then again, we have that contingency reserve fund, which currently has $50,000 in it, a little bit more. So that's kind of a broad overview. As I pointed out in the sermon, and I'll point out again in the sermon at 10:30, we make a lot of grants mostly out of the memorial fund, and we did out of that fund that we had created that when we first set up the foundation. The direct grants that we've given to nonprofits and to other causes, like we contributed $5,000 to Christine Brunson when she went over to Poland and Ukraine. In the 12 years that the foundation has existed, we have distributed grants of over $150,000. That's on top of everything we've done out of our operating budget. That is a good chunk of change for a church this size. So when I talk about, just us being able to punch above our weight class, a lot of that is because of the foundation. And because of the wisdom of mainly of the vestry members, when we came into this money from the Reaperts, and the foresight that they had in creating the foundation. A lot of that work was done by Bill Laubach. Most of you don't remember Bill and Gail Laubach. They moved to Colorado some years back, and Bill passed away about a year or two ago, but he was a lawyer, and he really handled all the paperwork associated with creating the foundation, which he described as bureaucracy at its very worst. So we owe Bill a great debt of gratitude. Are there any questions about any of that?
So most of the grants that you give are, to other agencies that come out of the endowment fund?
No, most of those come out of the memorial fund.
Oh,
Because that's basically unrestricted money that can be distributed by vote of the vestry. Now that amount that's in the memorial fund currently is 125,000. That is way more money than we like to have in that fund, because we believe that the money in the foundation needs to be doing ministry in one way or another. So we will probably be finding ways to distribute some of that money into needed projects, possibly through grants, and possibly by moving some of it into one of the other funds where it's, doing a little bit more work. So either into the endowment or the maintenance reserve fund. Those are the two funds that I really feel are important to continue to beef up, rather than to have that 125,000 kind of just sitting. But yeah, when we paid $20,000 to help renovate a house for the with the crisis network, that came out of the memorial. When Janie retired, the vestry voted to take $10,000 out of the memorial fund and give it to her as a retirement. So those are some of the things that the vestry has the ability to do with the memorial fund. This landscaping, these trees that have gone in out here, that was paid for out of this fund. And that's going to be another project that I'm going to want to talk about. I'll be having conversations, especially with my wardens, about further landscaping projects, because the Bradford pears out here along the street are mostly dead. So they're seeing the Princess Bride. They're not all dead, but they're definitely mostly dead. And they really need to be replaced. And that's not going to be a cheap project. So
The question, David.
Mhm.
On the bottom here, it says endowment basis tracking. It was just confusing to me. It's only shows $1,000 there when all the rest above that higher. Can you please explain how that happened? I don't know.
That is basically tracking the contributions into the endowment. So the reason for that is that there, in 23, there were not a whole lot of contributions made into the foundation. That kind of helps us to try. The reason we originally started doing that was because we were distributing any money in the endowment that was above the corpus. And so we couldn't know what the corpus was without tracking that basis. We eventually decided that was a silly way to run an endowment, because it meant, among other things, that some years the endowment stock markets would have a really good year and the endowment would distribute $30,000, $40,000 to the church and then nothing the next year. So the way we're doing it now, distributing a set percentage of the trailing a quarter average is it's pretty much a standard way of doing things nowadays. It makes a lot better sense. I'm not sure, Bill, is there some reason that we need to continue to track that basis, or is this just kind of a FYI idea or something that we're doing because we always have?
Well, I think it's good to know what your basis is. And that's what goes into the calculation, 3.5% of the 8 quarters. We use the basis of the endowment. We could do without tracking it, but I think it's good.
It gives you a sense, you know, that there have been total contributions into the endowment of $746,440, many distributions. I don't know what the total amount is that has been distributed in 12 years out of the endowment. And yet we still have an endowment that is $200,000 in excess of the basis. Is that?
Well, if you look at the basis, 746,
Mhm,
you have 888, the rest of that is money.
mhm. Yeah,
And, good to track what a hoodie is like for sure.
yeah, this is true. Yeah, good questions. Any other questions? Clear as mud. The foundation is run by a board of directors that are appointed by the vestry. It's basically an 8-person board. There's 6 at-large positions. So it's a 3-year term. So every year, 2 people rotate off, 2 people rotate on, and then 2 other people serve ex officio, and that's the rector and the senior ward. So currently that is Greg Setting and I who are serving on that board. Danny Hodge, who is, oh, she's with us. She's joined us on Zoom. She is our chair. You may not know that there is a set of excused absences from church on Sunday. One of those excused absences is supporting A&M sporting events. So, but good to have Danny here. Bill is the vice chair, and he is overseeing the investments and making sure that they're working in the way that they're supposed to. So maybe I'll turn it over to Bill and he can get into some of the details of investing, which I don't understand.
Well, you want to talk about that a little bit? What do you want to talk about here?
We can talk about that a little bit. Basically our funds are managed by UBS.
Right.
And so maybe you can talk a little bit about how that works and what your role is in it.
So, UBS is a major investment house. And we have everything that you see on this sheet. We have identical accounts at UBS. Endowment fund does. And so it all matches up. We have an overall investment strategy. 60% of our money is invested in equities or stock market. 40% invested in fixed income or cash. And that's a fairly standard approach to investing, in the market. We're not always exactly that. Sometimes we're 62%. Whatever, it's hard to do it on a monthly basis. Our equity investments are 100% of our equity investments are in a fund called a dividend annuity. And it's a fund managed by UBS. It's a fund of high quality stocks that are dividend stocks. There's no more than 30. And we made last year, we made a little over 11.5% on that, counting the dividend piece is about 3.5%. The rest of it's market appreciation. All but one of our 30 stocks raised their dividend last year. So it's been a very successful, a very conservative approach to being in the market. And, most of the stocks that we have are household names, you would know. And so you know, we're basically investing in investment companies. Our fixed income stuff is, mostly in funds that have been accumulated over the years, bond funds. And you know, our yield is not as much as it was in the stock market. It's designed to not be, because we're more conservative. And, you know, we watch it pretty carefully, you know. I print a report monthly that tracks our ratios and so forth. Pretty straightforward. But we watch it.
Yeah. And that's really important. We've gone through periods where people weren't watching it as carefully, and it's, you know, our manager is Mark Moore, real good guy, but you know, you always want to remind people that you're there. And so just kind of checking in from time to time is something that Bill does, which is just really, it's extremely.
Well, it's very easy for me. Mark's a good guy. He's very accessible. He returns your calls right away. So it's not on autopilot, but it's pretty close to where it ought to be.
Great.
And then that leads me to this brochure that we recently, I guess today is the inaugural launch. Him setting the heavy lifting on this brochure. And the purpose of it is to put forth the concept of plan giving. And all of the comments that Dave made in the beginning about the people that donated in their wills, large bequeath, they planned that, and that they planned that for a long time. It took a long time for that to come to fruition. Plan giving is a very important concept for the long-term growth and health of this foundation. We can only earn so much money on the money we have. We have to figure out a way to grow it. And so we're hopeful that over time, people will think of us when they redo their wills, or there's some other strategies that are pretty useful. There's some new rules on IRA distributions, for example. For those of us that are over 70, we're forced to distribute, and if you have an IRA, you're forced to distribute a certain percentage based on the size of it and all that. You can use that distribution directly to a charity and avoid taxation penalties, and it's really quite useful. I'm sure everybody gives money to the church in some form, and if you're forced to distribute the money from your IRA, pay taxes on it, and then give it to the church, it's not as much money as if you give it directly to the church and there's no tax. And so we're hopeful that we can put that concept forth. I'm sure a lot of people know about it, some don't. And then all these other concepts in the plan giving brochure, the number one way that people plan to give is in their will. Every will has a basket clause at the end. If there's no errors left when a person dies and their estate's probated, if there are no errors whatsoever, there's usually a charity that the person has designated as the final place that his money would go. That's a great place to mention something like the Trinity Foundation. Most people have errors. Some don't. And then within the confines of the trust, will, people make individual gifts, and then they bequeath upon their death a certain amount of money to. And so we're hopeful to generate some conversations with this brochure over time about planned giving. All of the foundation board, including myself, is available to meet with people one-on-one. Questions, advice. We have a list of professionals that we can refer you to. Attorneys, accounting, people like that. But giving is an important thing that people eventually consider when because they have to, even if they don't give it to us, they've got to figure out where their assets go. So, any questions about our brochures? Straightforward. It's not something that's going to be useful to everybody. We hope that it will be useful to somebody, and it's around when the need arises.
Yeah, and that's great. And yeah, the Amy and I have Trinity in our will. When we set up our will, we need to update it probably, but when we set it up, and still to some degree, it's true. If something were to happen to me, Amy'd need all the money she could get to raise our child and all that. So, we're not able to put in a ton of money to go to Trinity, but every little bit matters. And we've had people like E. Yoder. Before she died, she purchased a horse. A Trinity benefit. I think that was over $100,000 that she left us because of her estate plan. Really is, it's just a way to continue the ministries of this church. One of our responsibilities.
People have a tendency, me included, think that you have your will structured, you resolved, you made some decisions, everything is done. Well, in my will, the basket charity is the Boy Scout, which I did 25 years ago. The Boy Scout is out of business. So I have, my money goes to nobody. So I have to, although I have plenty of errors, I'm pretty sure that they'll get up in there.
I gotta run and get ready for baptism. Thank you all so much. Yeah, it's an exciting day. Thank you, Bill. Any other questions? Direct them to Bill, or you can direct them to Danny, who's here via Zoom. So you can also ask her any questions, and I'll see you all in church.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Danny.
This is awesome.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. You're a good watcher too. I know you're watching.
Well,
Here, I'll take this. We got need this video. You keep yourself.
yeah, I might.
Yeah, I think, are you feeling better?
We're not out of it.
Well, you can't see. This is tape that
Oh, that's something that it's- it is- I was talking.
Oh, good, we're good. That's not what you know what I do. I have the thought.
Still, right when they build the game.
Yeah. Well, I had Bill. But that's all. That means I can.
Very
Okay, well, that's all right. You can read lips.
hobbled into the bathroom. So you go down.
I'm Wilson Camp. Nice to meet you. I was on the foundation board for a couple of years,
Oh.
19, I guess, and I lost all the sight in my left eye and I couldn't read the statements or something. But I worked for the state auditor here in Texas, but I worked the standards. But the other thing, they're all down for all the church and stuff. Anyway, it's,
Well, there's a lot of units, I'm sure.
He's car dealer.
Yeah.
3 years.
There you go.
Oh,
I'm glad your knees are doing.
yes, they are. Thank you.
It's not straightforward in terms of.
It's my,
You know, little church and. So I can.
the glasses, so.
That's the idea of it.
totally.
So a lot of those things.
Church assessment.
Yeah.
They were.
Yeah.
By the financial stability and the care when they said all the Episcopal churches that we got around the country, this one was close to
On his marriage.
5 and.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and be like, where?
No, all the.
I'll tell you that side. And I didn't wait your name.
See, we have a. I'm saying, what the hell again?
Oh, I know.
I know, but I don't have to let it damage you.
Thank you.